The war had not yet reached her doorstep, not yet. But somewhere in Europe, a shadow was spreading. And in that shadow, one woman would rise to become a legend. Her name was Nancy Wake, a woman who would one day lead resistance fighters, sabotage Nazi supply lines, and outwit the Gestapo so completely that they would name her the White Mouse. Our story begins not in the chaos of battle, but in the quiet suburbs of Wellington, New Zealand, in 1912. Nancy Grace Augusta Wake was born the youngest of 6 children, a bright-eyed girl with a will stronger than steel. Her parents were Australian, and when Nancy was 2, the family moved back to Sydney. Her father left soon after, a betrayal Nancy never forgot. That wound shaped her. She grew up fierce, stubborn, and free-spirited. Even as a teenager, she knew she wanted more than the life of a housewife or secretary. She wanted adventure, and when she saw newsreels of Nazi rallies in Germany years later, her blood boiled.
Those poor people, someone has to stop him.
In 1932, with a small inheritance, Nancy set sail for Europe. She was only 20, fearless and alone, stepping into a continent on the brink of destruction. Paris in the 1930s was alive. Smoke, jazz, art, and revolution. Nancy trained as a journalist, writing for newspapers in London and Paris. She was sent to Vienna, where she witnessed something that changed her forever. On a cold day in 1933, she watched helplessly as Nazi soldiers whipped Jewish men and women through the streets. Their faces bled, their dignity stripped away. That night, Nancy wrote in her journal, "If ever the chance comes, I'll do anything to stop those bastards." By 1939, she was living in the port city of Marseille, married to Henri Fiacre, a wealthy French industrialist. They were madly in love. But when Hitler's armies invaded Poland and France declared war, Nancy's heart was already on the battlefield. The war came quickly. By June 1940, France fell. German tanks rolled through Paris. The tricolor flag was torn down. Nancy watched as the swastika was hoisted above the Eiffel Tower, and something inside her snapped.
They'll regret ever setting foot in France.
She joined the French resistance, using her social position and English accent to smuggle messages, supplies, and downed Allied pilots across the border into Spain. She learned to lie, to charm, and to run. They gave her code names, Lucienne, the Mouse, Madame Andre, but one name would define her forever: the White Mouse. The Gestapo couldn't catch her. She slipped through checkpoints, evaded patrols, and outwitted interrogations. A ghost in occupied France. And with every escape, the bounty on her head grew. By 1943, it was said the Gestapo had offered 5 million francs for her capture. But Nancy didn't stop. She only got bolder.
France, 1941.
The country lay broken, occupied by the German army. Checkpoints lined every road. Posters warned that anyone aiding the enemy would face execution. But beneath the surface, a new war had begun. A war fought in whispers, handshakes, and secret codes. And at the heart of it was a woman named Nancy Wake. By day, she played the part of the socialite wife of Henri Fiacre, smiling at German officers over café tables in Marseille. By night, she guided Allied pilots to safety, forged papers, and transported weapons under the noses of the occupiers. Her charm was her armor. Her wit was her weapon.
The Germans think I'm just a silly little girl who likes her champagne. Let them.
The men in her resistance network soon learned. Nancy Wake was no ordinary woman. She ran messages between cells faster than anyone. She organized escape routes through the Pyrenees into Spain, carrying forged documents hidden in her clothing. And when Gestapo patrols tightened their grip, Nancy changed her face. She dyed her hair, altered her gait, changed her accent. To them, she was everywhere and nowhere. One night, in late 1942, she guided a downed British airman through the backstreets of Toulouse. They hid in barns, tunnels, and abandoned train cars. For 3 days, they evaded capture. When they finally reached the Pyrenees, the airman collapsed in exhaustion. Nancy knelt beside him.
We're almost there, darling. The mountains don't stop the brave.
They crossed by night, crawling over rocks and snow. She carried the man's backpack when he couldn't. When they reached Spain, he turned to her, tears in his eyes. "You've saved my life."
No, dear. I've just borrowed it back from the Nazis.
Word of her bravery spread through the resistance. Her code name changed again, Helene. But the Gestapo was watching. They raided homes, interrogated friends, and tracked rumors of a woman with dark hair and a British accent. In early 1943, the Gestapo closed in. Nancy barely escaped, slipping through a back alley as soldiers stormed her Marseille apartment. Henri Fiacca, her husband, stayed behind. Nancy begged him to flee.
Please, Henri, come with me. They'll kill you.
"My darling, I can't. Someone must stay to protect our people." They kissed for the last time. Nancy disappeared into the night, fleeing through the mountains toward Spain once again. She would never see him again. Weeks later, she learned the truth. Henri had been captured, tortured, and executed by the Gestapo for refusing to betray her. For Nancy, grief became fury. From that day forward, she made a vow. She would not rest until every German soldier who set foot in France regretted it. 1943, London. After months on the run, Nancy reached England and joined the Special Operations Executive, Churchill's secret army. The SOE trained her in everything: parachuting, sabotage, radio operation, silent killing. She shot better than most men. She could assemble and disassemble a Sten gun blindfolded. One instructor remarked, "Wake, you're the most natural soldier we've ever had."
I just hate the bastards.
June 1944. On a moonlit night, Nancy jumped from a Royal Air Force plane over central France. Her parachute opened against the darkness like a white flower. She landed hard in the fields near Auvergne, deep in enemy territory. Waiting for her was Major John Farmer, her SOE contact. "Welcome to France, Helene."
Let's go kill some Germans.
Over the coming weeks, Nancy organized the Maquis, groups of French resistance fighters hiding in the forests and mountains. She trained them in demolition, tactics, and ambush warfare. She arranged weapons drops from British planes, coordinated attacks on German convoys, and destroyed rail lines to cripple Nazi reinforcements. The locals adored her. The Germans feared her. She was no longer just the White Mouse. She was the resistance queen. Her legend grew. She cycled hundreds of kilometers to deliver coded messages after radio operators were captured. A 3-day ride through enemy territory without sleep. When asked how she did it, she replied, "Simple. You just keep pedaling until you're safe or dead." She became the symbol of defiance. And yet, the danger was growing. The Gestapo had renewed their hunt. Posters with her face appeared across France. 5 million Francs, dead or alive. But Nancy didn't hide. She prepared for the biggest mission of her life. A mission that would ignite the heart of France and turn the White Mouse into a living legend. Central France, 1944. The forests of Auvergne were thick and silent, hiding ghosts among the trees. But these were not spirits. They were fighters, the Maquis, men and women of the French resistance, waiting for their moment to strike. And leading them was a woman with a rifle slung over her shoulder and fire in her eyes. Nancy Wake. They called her Madame André now. The men respected her, but they also tested her. Some doubted that a woman could command a company of hardened guerrillas, until she proved them wrong. During her first training drill, a young recruit refused to obey her orders. Nancy walked over calmly, grabbed his rifle, and shot a melon clean off a fence post 30 meters away. She handed the gun back. "Any other questions, boys?" After that, no one ever questioned her again. Nancy Wake's camp became one of the most effective resistance networks in France. They ambushed supply convoys, derailed trains, and destroyed bridges carrying German reinforcements toward Normandy. Every night, she coordinated with London via secret radio, using codes, phrases, and Morse pulses that could mean life or death if intercepted. One mistake, 1 second of hesitation, and the Gestapo could triangulate her signal. But Nancy was calm under pressure. Her operators said she never blinked, never trembled. Her code name to London was Helene. Her reports were precise, her voice unwavering. and London listened. In early June, just days before the Allied landings in Normandy, Nancy received a coded message from London. Prepare maximum disruption. That night, she gathered her men around a crude wooden table. Tomorrow we make France roar. Hit every road, every rail line, every signal. I want the Germans blind and bleeding before they ever reach Normandy. The men cheered. They trusted her completely. At dawn they moved, explosives strapped to their backs, rifles oiled and loaded, faces blackened with soot. Nancy led from the front. She cycled from group to group, checking every position herself. She knew every route, every timing, every fuse. And when the first train roared past, loaded with German troops, Nancy gave the signal. The sky lit up orange. Metal screamed. Flames tore through the forest. It was the largest single act of sabotage in the region. Over the next 48 hours, the Maquis destroyed 7 bridges, 11 trains, and countless vehicles. German convoys burned along the highways. Commanders panicked. Reinforcements meant for Normandy were trapped miles away. One German officer wrote in his report, "The resistance in this region is commanded by a woman. She is dangerous, highly intelligent, and should be eliminated at all costs." But finding her was like chasing smoke. The Gestapo sent patrols, spies, and informants. Villages were burned in retaliation. Farmers hung from their barns as warnings. Nancy carried the weight of those deaths like a stone in her chest. One evening, after losing 3 of her closest men to a German ambush, she sat alone by the river. The moon reflected on the black water. She pulled from her coat pocket a small photograph. Henri Fiacca, smiling, alive. "I hope you're proud of me, my love. I'll make them pay." That night, she planned something even bolder. An attack not on a convoy, but on an entire German garrison. The next morning, she led 700 Maquis fighters against a heavily armed German outpost near Montluçon. The battle raged for hours. Bullets tore through the trees. Nancy sprinted between trenches, shouting orders, hauling ammunition, treating the wounded.
Madame,
"We're running low. Then take theirs when they fall." By nightfall, the German forces broke. The Maquis stood victorious. But the cost was high, dozens dead, more wounded. Nancy didn't cry. Not then. Not until she walked among the fallen after the battle. She kneeled beside each one, touching their faces gently. "You fought for France. You'll never be forgotten." The following week, Nancy undertook one of her most legendary feats. Their radio operator had been captured. Without communication, they were blind, unable to reach London for supplies or intelligence. So Nancy did the impossible. She cycled nearly 300 kilometers through enemy territory to deliver a new message. No escort, no rest, no mercy if caught. She pedaled through rain and hunger, past checkpoints, across rivers. On the 3rd day, she reached the next SOE contact and collapsed, barely conscious. "My God, Helene, you made it? Tell London. We need more explosives." That ride, known today as the Ride of the White Mouse, became one of the most celebrated acts of courage in resistance history. And London responded. Planes dropped crates of weapons, supplies, and ammunition under the moonlight. The Maquis grew stronger. Their morale soared. But with power came attention. And the Gestapo was closing in. Nancy didn't know it yet, but the next phase of her war would test her more than any bullet, any mission. Because in the shadows of occupied France, even the bravest hero can be betrayed. Summer, 1944. The forests of France whispered of victory. The Allies had landed in Normandy, and German morale was cracking. But for Nancy Wake and her Maquis fighters, the war was far from over. They were hunted, surrounded, and exhausted. And somewhere in those woods, a traitor was waiting. The Gestapo had learned something new, a detail only an insider could have told them. An upcoming weapons drop, exact coordinates, exact time. When the drop zone lit up that night, so did the sky. Tracer rounds, machine gun fire, screams. Dozens of Nancy's men were killed before the crates even hit the ground. She dove for cover, mud splattering her face, bullets tearing through the air. Fall back. Into the trees. Hours later, as dawn broke, she surveyed the aftermath. Her camp was gone. Half her unit was dead or missing. The rest were terrified. And Nancy, shaking with anger, realized the truth. Someone talked. Betrayal was the one enemy she could never forgive. Over the next week, Nancy and her trusted lieutenant, Henri Tardivat, set a trap. They spread false information about another weapons drop, a location only a handful of people knew. 2 nights later, the Gestapo appeared at that exact spot. The traitor was caught. A local man, nervous, pale, his pockets heavy with German money. Nancy didn't hesitate. "You cost us brothers. You'll cost them nothing more." Nancy later said it was the hardest thing she ever did. But in war, mercy can be fatal. In the weeks that followed, the Gestapo doubled their patrols. Entire villages were razed. Yet the Maquis kept fighting. Nancy coordinated ambushes, sabotage, and rescues, always one step ahead. But the stress was showing. She hadn't slept more than 2 hours in days. Her clothes were torn, her hands blistered. Still, she pressed on. If we stop, they win. Late one night, during a supply run, Nancy's convoy was ambushed near Montlucan. Machine guns opened up from both sides. The truck swerved off the road and slammed into a ditch. Flames licked at the sky. Nancy crawled from the wreckage, her ears ringing, blood on her sleeve. She could hear the Germans shouting in the distance. Dogs barking, boots stomping closer. She grabbed her pistol and crawled into the darkness, through mud and broken branches. For hours, she lay still under a fallen tree, rain dripping down her face. A Gestapo patrol passed within meters. One soldier stopped. He shone his flashlight through the undergrowth. It stopped just inches from her boot. Then, a shout in German. Another soldier called out, impatient. The beam of light turned away. Nancy exhaled. She'd escaped again. But by dawn, she was alone, soaked, freezing, and without supplies. It took 2 days to reach her remaining comrades. When she arrived, they didn't recognize her at first. She was pale, trembling, her clothes in tatters. "Mon Dieu, you look like death. Death would have had to catch me first." Despite exhaustion, she resumed command. There was no time to grieve, no room for weakness. The Germans were retreating north toward Paris. And Nancy Wake, with what remained of her Maquis, would make sure their retreat became a rout. She led a series of lightning raids on German convoys, cutting off supply lines and destroying communications. Her fighters ambushed reinforcements, seized fuel depots, and took hundreds of prisoners. Each success echoed through the valleys, whispers of liberation spreading like wildfire. But Nancy carried the weight of her choices in silence. The betrayal, the executions, the endless faces of the fallen. One evening, she sat by a fire, writing a message to London by candlelight. "To the men I have lost, I can only say this. I will not stop until your deaths mean something." She folded the letter, sealed it, and tucked it inside her jacket. Days later, that same jacket would be riddled with bullet holes. But Nancy Wake would still be standing. Liberation was coming. The Allies were advancing through France. And for Nancy, one final mission awaited, her most dangerous yet. A mission that would decide not just her fate, but the fate of every man who followed her. August 1944. The air above the mountains of central France vibrated with the thunder of war. After years of darkness, the world was changing. The Allies were pushing the Germans north. Paris was on the edge of liberation. But deep in the heart of occupied territory, Nancy Wake and her Maquis fighters still had one more battle to fight. Their mission: intercept a retreating German column, more than 500 enemy soldiers, with barely half that number of resistance fighters. It was madness. It was suicide. But Nancy didn't flinch. "If we let them through, they'll kill civilians in their path. We hold this road or die trying." The Maquis took positions along a narrow valley road lined with pines and rocky cliffs. Explosives were hidden beneath bridges and culverts. The men looked to Nancy, tired, mud-stained, her Sten gun slung over her shoulder. "Madam, if this goes wrong, then make it go right." The German convoy approached. Tanks and trucks clattered down the road, filled with soldiers, ammunition, and fear. Nancy raised her hand. One breath. Two. She dropped her arm. Flames erupted as the first tank hit the mine. Machine guns roared from the treeline. The valley became an inferno of smoke and screams. Nancy moved through it all, fearless. She fired, reloaded, shouted orders. When one man froze in terror, she slapped him on the shoulder. "Don't you dare die before we win." The battle lasted all morning. When it ended, the valley was silent except for the crackle of burning trucks. 200 German soldiers were dead. The rest had fled. The Maquis had lost 30 men, but they had held the line. News of the victory spread quickly. Other resistance groups began to rise. Within weeks, Allied forces broke through the German defenses. Paris was liberated on. Nancy and her fighters marched into the city alongside Free French troops. Crowds lined the streets, waving flags, throwing flowers, crying with joy. Nancy, still in her uniform, stood on the Champs-Élysées as the bells rang out across the city. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry. "We did it, Henri. We really did it." After the war, Nancy returned to Marseille to learn the full truth about her husband's death. He had refused to betray her even under torture. She visited his grave and stood there for a long time. Then she smiled through tears. "You kept your promise. Now I'll keep mine to live." In the years that followed, Nancy Wake became one of the most decorated women of the Second World War. She received the George Medal from Britain, the Médaille de la Résistance and Croix de Guerre from France, and the Medal of Freedom from the United States. Yet she never thought of herself as a hero. When journalists asked her what made her so brave, she would laugh and say, "Brave? I just hated the Nazis, darling. That's all." Nancy Wake lived to be 98 years old. In her final years, she was often asked if she would do it all again. Risk her life, fight, lose everything she loved. She would think for a moment, and then smile. Of course, someone had to. History remembers many heroes, but few faced tyranny with such wit, courage, and sheer defiance as the woman the Gestapo once called the White Mouse. And in the silent forests of France, where rusted rifles and broken helmets still lie hidden among the roots, some say the wind still carries her voice, whispering through the trees, "You'll never catch me." This was the story of Nancy Wake, the White Mouse, a woman who fought not for glory, but for freedom. If you found her courage inspiring, please share this video and subscribe for more untold stories of World War II. Because history isn't just written by those who won, it's remembered by those who dared.